So today I'm making a start on fitting the HKS GT100R kit to the Honda S660. This is the new turbo, a HKS GT3. Some backyard special components, the upgraded fuel pump and regulator, all the bits you need. This is the flash editor that we need once the job is done to adjust the map on car. And then we've got the backyard special intercooler and some upgraded pipework. So the intercooler will just be in the same place as the original. This is the intake pipe at the top, and the turbo is tucked away down the bottom here. Now here are all the instructions, of course in Japanese, but if we flip them over they are actually in English as well. And you get a full parts list and a very concise step-by-step guide of the job at hand, which makes it a lot easier to do. And we'll be starting with the fuel upgrade kit. To do the job we need to drop the fuel tank, which is located here at the back underside of the car, just in front of the engine. I started by removing the bonnet, which gives a lot more access, as with it pointing up towards the back of the car it does get in the way quite a bit. So we had two 14mm nuts holding the bonnet in position. Now to disconnect the battery we had to remove the storage compartment from the front of the car. The battery is located just behind this. There are just 4 screws to turn anti-clockwise, which release the compartment. If we're just disconnecting the battery, all we need to do is fold back this cover, but there are 2 10mm fixings to remove the battery completely. But we just need to loosen the 10mm terminal and lift the connector out of position. Now remove the air intake, which is all 10mm bolts, and then the intercooler, which is also held on with 10mm bolts. Even the hose clips are 10mm. Personally, I'm taking the hoses off and leaving them off because I'll be upgrading the pipes when we upgrade the intercooler also. Now we need to loosen all the wiring harness at this side of the car, and we're also removing the two little brackets with 10 mils. This is for a job later on where we'll be fitting the adjustable fuel regulator and fitting the new fuel pipes that are required. Now we're disconnecting all the fuel hoses coming from the fuel tank. On the main one we had these white plastic clips that needed to be removed prior to squeezing the connectors and undoing the pipe. Once you're absolutely certain that every fuel pipe is disconnected and the connector at the top of the pressure sensor, then we're ready to go underneath the car and start to drop the tank. So we've got one under tray to remove. There are two 10mm bolts at the front and three trim clips that can be loosened with a screwdriver if they're still in good condition. Disconnect this wheel arch liner from the heat shield guarding the tank. And now we've just got 4 bolts holding this cage around the tank and holding the tank in position. Now that we have the tank off the car, we can work on removing the pump assembly. So we just need to disconnect the remaining fuel lines. Now it does say to remove the lock nut that there is a special tool, but we can get away without using this. We're going to gently knock the lock round. We need to take special care not to damage the float, which measures the amount of fuel in the tank. Now, the reservoir is full of fuel, so you are going to drop quite a bit of fuel at this point. But there we are then. We don't want to bend the metal on this float. Be sure to cover the opening for the fuel tank while we're working elsewhere. Now, to separate the tank assembly from the reservoir and ultimately get to the pump, we need to remove these lock rings. Now, you might want to be a bit more careful than I was. I did drop this on the floor, so just watch out for them, don't lose them. Got one on both sides. I'm going to speed through some of this footage as a lot of it is quite self-explanatory, but any tricky points I will mention anything you need to know. So we're removing all the cabling held in position so that we can separate the tank assembly. Disconnect the connector for the fuel pump. It's just a little tab that's very easy to remove, and these require a little bit of patience as you need to push out the centre and squeeze the pins in at the same time. I do apologise for getting my head in shot there, but this can be done with a small screwdriver and a pair of pliers more easily. So we've got the old pump out and we're ready to switch over to the new pump. So on the new pump we need to fit a slightly shorter spacer, and we have a new O-ring in the kit too. Now you'll want to make sure that the old O-ring has been removed from the reservoir. And if it hasn't, then pull it out. Now for the new pressure regulator. Now switch over the O-rings. You only need 2 of the 3 that were fitted to the original one, and I have actually fitted the larger one too high up there, you'll see in a second. Just need to drop it down to the next ledge. Now we're ready to fit the new fuel pump. So I'm attaching the filter on the bottom prior to installation, made it a little bit easier. Now we need to drill a hole for the fuel return. The hole size specified was 8.4mm. We had an 8.5mm drill bit, and as it's a clearance hole, this was okay. Now we need to clip on the piece of hose that will drop into the reservoir. We've got these brand new fuel clips, and they have these tabs holding them open that we just need to pull off. Now we're ready to reassemble the complete assembly. So we need to get the circlips back on these rods, relocate all the wiring, and plug the fuel pump back in. Then we need to make sure that the fuel return hose goes into the reservoir. And finally we can get the circlips back on. Now we're ready to refit the assembly back in the tank, refit the gasket. It may help to lubricate the inside and outside of the gasket, or to have the gasket sat in the tank rather than on the pump. Note that the assembly does actually have a little arrow that lines up with two marks on the tank. If you see the yellow line that is currently spinning on the lock nut, that lines up with the line on the tank, and in that area there are two plastic ridges where the small triangle on the fuel pump assembly lines up with. Now we're cutting the provided fuel hose for the fuel return. It was around 600mm, but the exact figure will be in the instructions. Also fitting the provided plastic trunking that will protect the fuel hose and other hoses from rubbing against each other. And now we're ready to carefully refit the tank in position. So we need to watch the hoses go into the right place and slowly jack the fuel tank into the correct position. Now we need to split this original fuel hose because we need the connectors on the end. So we carefully cut down the rubber sheathing to even more carefully cut this plastic sheathing, as we don't want to damage the connector which will be slotting into our rubber fuel hose. Cutting the fuel hose into 3 lengths. So we're assembling the hoses as specified on this 3-way connector. We're fitting the brand new hose clips and fitting the connectors that we removed from the original hose on 2 of the pipes. Now to assemble the adjustable fuel regulator bracket. This is a new bracket provided with the kit, which goes on top of the two brackets that we removed at the beginning of the job. It's a little bit awkward, but the provided spaces go between the new bracket and the old bracket, as you can see here. It can be a little bit fiddly and it's difficult to do both brackets at the same time, but it's manageable. Now to reconnect all the original fuel hoses. And now we're ready to fit the new fuel hose assembly that we've made with the original clips. Make sure that all the connectors are tight, and these ones require tightening manually. Now we've got a new piece of vacuum hose to fit, so remove the engine cover, as this hose will be coming from the intake manifold. go into the new adjustable fuel regulator. So take off the original vacuum hose from the intake manifold, and we're fitting the short piece of vacuum hose ready to fit a T connector for the new hose. Refit the engine cover, and fit trunking to all the new fuel hoses. Do a final check of all the hoses and connections. And now we're ready to connect the battery. I'm not refitting the intercooler, as of course I have to fit a new intercooler. We're just checking that the car runs after doing this job, and then we'll be moving on to the next part of the job. So now we've tested the new fuel pump and made sure that the car is running. Just need to check for leaks, and now we're ready to get on with the next part of the job, which is removing the turbo and fitting the new one.